Everyone agrees. Yes. Park yourself here. Hana. It's okay.
Okay, we need to understand this motion today. Okay, just pass it around. Okay, we're gonna pass it. We're gonna pass it. Okay, let's have everyone's attention.
So good.
Do we have everyone's attention? We're gonna pass around the attendance sheet. So everyone can write in their name on Mrs. Nemi's class. Please pass it around. And I'll do my class. Rivka Vendetska, Sarah Business. Please say yes if you hear your name. Marco Alana Butler. Someone is here. Michael Fernandez. Please say yes if you hear your name. Sarah Goldenberg. Maya Hernandez. Racha Simcha Ignashkina. Moshka Kazachev. Sarah Keller, please remember to pass around the attendance sheets in the other class.
Do you want me to see this?
Oh, you want to do it? You're going to do everyone? Perfect, perfect. Mushka Kazachev, Sarah Keller, Gary Kapilovich, Kava Krinko, Rotem Lack, Nora Namdar. And here, please say yes. If you hear your name, can't always see everyone right away. Kosheir Princelow. Melacha Princelow. Here. Sharon El Sasson. Here. Not here. Shana Silkovitz.
Here.
Here. Where? Sofa Guliyafa. Yara Ziegerman.
Here.
Yeah. Okay. So did we finish attendance? Okay, everyone, please, if you can just take your seats. If you're able to come closer, so you can hear me, so you don't have to scream. Whoever's able to sit closer it's preferable, easier to hear. Okay, you're done with attendance? Okay, so we're going to stop. We're going to do 2 melachos today. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
We're going to do the melacha. We're going to do the melacha of Tzovei'ah. Tzovei'ah is dying. D-Y-E. Dying. D-Y-E-I-N-G. Dying. That's a short melacha. And then we're going to do the melacha of Kosheir, which is Kosheir. The second melacha we're going to do today is Kosheir, tying knots and untying knots. These are two short. You have it quiet so everyone can hear in the back also. These are 2 short melachas, so we should be able to cover it today. So the first one is the melacha of Tzovei'ah. Tzovei'ah. I'm going to stand here, maybe it's better. You don't hear me there? Yeah. Tzovei'ah, it is dying. In the Mishkan, so every melacha, everything that we can't do on Shabbos is because that's the way it was in the Mishkan. In the Mishkan, there was Tzovei'ah, there was dyeing, there was the tapestries that covered the Mishkan, had to be dyed in different colors. So there's a melacha of dyeing. These are herbs that would grow, they would grind them, whatever the whole procedure was, and they would dye it to get that color. So we can't do dyeing on Shabbos. Now, a practical example of dyeing on Shabbos applies to women because they put on makeup and lipstick, and that's the reason why you can't do makeup, lipstick on Shabbos, because it's Tzovei'ah, it's dyeing. But there's something else that's important to understand, and that is that sometimes people think that they could use food for makeup, which means, let's say you have cherries by the table. So you could think It's not makeup. You can't use makeup in Shabbos. No, I'm not using makeup. It's food. You're gonna take the cherries and you're gonna use the cherries for makeup. You're not allowed. It's the same prohibition. Maybe it's not exactly on the same level because it's not as permanent as regular makeup, but it's clearly prohibited to use food as makeup because that's the way you do it. So you're not allowed to use food for makeup also. Now, another thing is you can't, let's say you're not using for makeup. You ate, you had cherries, your hands are all red, and now you want to wash it off. Of course, you're allowed to wash it off. But what about if I wipe it off on something? I take a napkin and I wipe off the cherries. My hands are all red. I'm going to wipe it up onto the napkin. Is this called Tzovei'ah? I'm dyeing the napkin? You say no.
No, because your intention.
Because the intention is not to dye. Intention is you're ruining it, right? What?
The intention is to clean your hands.
Okay, that's good. That's one point. But there's another important point is that you're actually ruining it. Okay, now let me explain. There's something more to it. And this is the beginning. There's a difference between a paper towel, a napkin, and a towel, material. So if you're doing it with material, a regular towel, you're not allowed to do it. Even though it's not your intention, and you're actually ruining it, but midrabanan, rabbinically, it's prohibited. So it's not a regular way of dyeing, it's not min haTorah, it's not also by the Torah, but rabbinically, according to our sages, it's prohibited to take your hands that are red with cherries and wipe it on a towel, even though it's not really dyeing, because dyeing means, the definition of dyeing means that you're improving the material. Here you're ruining it. But midrabanan, rabbinically, you cannot wipe your hands onto a towel if your hands are red with cherry or any other strong color and you're wiping it onto the towel, you're not allowed to do that. Okay, question. Could I do it with a napkin? What about a napkin?
Yeah.
Same thing? Napkin, yes. Paper towel, no. Napkin, yes. What's the difference?
Paper towel, no.
No, I'm sorry. Thank you. I said the wrong one. Towel, no. A towel you cannot. Material you cannot. But a napkin, disposable, you could. What's the difference? Okay. It's more than just intention. It's just because, it's not meant to stay this way. It's going into the garbage. So there's no problem. When it's a material, it's not going into the garbage. You're going to be using it again. It's a fabric that's remaining. But paper towels, napkins is not a problem. So practically these days, it's much easier because in the old days, they had to wipe on material. It was a problem. Didn't have disposable. You have disposable, so there's no problem. You take a napkin, you wipe it off, but you cannot. Let's say you have a towel and you don't care. It's an old towel. You don't care if it's going to get cherries on it. You're not allowed. You can't take your hands that have cherries and wipe it onto the towel and say, oh, I don't care about the towel anyways. No, you're not allowed. Midrabanan, rabbinically, this is prohibited. Yeah.
Are you allowed to tear off paper towel not on the perforations from a roll?
So that's, ask me right after class. It's a good, after class, I'll answer the question. I want to stick to the topic. It's a good question.
But
Okay,
you're
I wanna-
wiping off your fruit, you need a paper towel.
Right, okay, right. It has a connection. We'll answer after. I want to do the melacha of Kosheir, and we don't have so much time. Okay, so the next melacha is Kosheir. So I wish I had a board, but we'll have to deal without the board. So there's a melacha of Kosheir. You can write down the word Kosheir, Kuf, Vav, Shin, Reish. Shin, Reish. Kosheir, tying. Kuf, Vav, Shin, Reish is Kosheir, tying. You're not allowed to tie on Shabbos. You can't tie knots on Shabbos. It's one of the melachas that was in the Mishkan. Now, there is min haTorah and midrabanan. Like in any other melacha, you have where it's prohibited by the Torah. It's prohibited biblically than where it's prohibited midrabanan by our sages. They're both prohibited, but it's on a different level. If it's prohibited only by our sages, there could be more leniencies. So there is, write this down, Kosheir shel kayama, Kosheir shel kayama. Okay? These are the words we're going to be working with. Kosheir, a knot. So the melacha is Kosheir. That's the melacha. Now we're saying we're using the description to describe when it's prohibited by the Torah, a Kosheir, a knot, shel kayama. Okay? Right, the word kayama is kuf yud yud mem aleph. Okay? Write down. Kosheir, a knot, shel kayama, which is kayama means it exists, actually permanent. Write down the word permanent. But you want to write it down in English? It's fine, right? A permanent knot. Maybe that's maybe easier. And then you're going to write down a non-permanent knot, a Kosheir she'ena shel kayama, a knot that's not a permanent knot. Okay, don't get confused. Not K-N-O-T. That's the not a permanent knot. K-N-O-T. Okay, so so you're going to write down permanent knot and a non-permanent knot. Now, so you have these words, permanent knot and non-permanent knot. Now, we're going to take each word by itself and explain what it means. We have to explain what it means permanent, what it means not. It sounds very simple. Like, why am I talking so much? Permanent knot? No, because these words, we've been focusing on this. There's a permanent knot and a non-permanent knot. But what's the definition of a knot? It's not so simple. What's the definition of a permanent knot? What does it mean? So now I'm going to explain what is a knot. So I'm going to give an example of a knot. When you tie it, so we're not discussing yet what you're allowed, what you're not allowed. First, we have to understand. Once we understand what it means, then everything will go smooth. What is a knot? Okay, so imagine this is a pair of shoes. This is a shoe. So everyone, watch me here. The regular way of tying your shoes. Just showing in case anyone gets confused over there. So the regular way of tying a shoe, a knot with a bow, is that clear to everyone? When I say a knot with a bow, everyone knows what that means? Yeah? You know, sometimes different languages. Is that clear what it means, a knot with a bow?
No.
Okay. When you tie your shoes, watch what I'm doing. When you tie your shoes, you're going like this. Watching me? And you make a bow, and then you make a knot. Yeah? The way you tie your shoes, yeah?
That's just a bow.
1 second. I made two bows, then I went over it, right? Is this clear what I did? Okay. Okay. Can everyone see what I'm doing? I'm tying my shoes now, right? I'm going like this. Going like this. Two bows, right? There's going to be two bows here, right? And then I tie the shoes. Does everyone understand what I just did? Simple, right? Okay. Is this called a knot? Yes or no? This is called a knot. This is called a knot. Okay. What else is called a knot? The rest is simple. I mean, this, if you make this, you go like this, it's a knot too. Okay. Now, what does it mean, permanent knot? What's the definition of permanent knot? Permanent knot means that you tie it in a way that it's going to stay there forever. Or at least as of now, you have no plans to untie it. So if you're tying something in a way that as far as your thinking now is that it's going to stay this way. You might decide to change your mind, but as of now, it's staying this way. That means if you tie your shoes, let's say, hypothetically speaking, you tie your shoes and the shoes are going to stay tied. You're not untying the shoes. There are some people, they just push off their shoes. They don't untie it, okay? So I'm just, let's say someone's going to you tie this type of knot or this type of knot. This is a knot. Okay, now it's not a strong knot. It's hard for you to see. We're soon going to talk about this like a very strong knot. If I could pull it very hard, it's going to be strong. But even if it's not strong, see the way it's like this? It's not, you can pass it around if you want. Can you catch? Oh, sorry. Pass it around. Is it a strong knot? Everyone see it? Is it strong? Did I pull it tight?
No.
No, but it's a knot. This is a knot. This is considered a knot. If I pull it stronger, we call it a strong knot. We're going to still talk about a strong knot. Can everyone guess it? Okay, so everyone got the idea. I didn't pull it strong. Understand? I didn't pull it tight. There is some air space here, but it's called a knot. Now, another thing, if I would go like this, let's say like this, okay, is this called a knot? Now this is tricky already. If I go like this is a knot, the same thing I did before. Because I was trying to figure out something else. If I would go over my shoe, let's say I would go like this. I'll go over my shoe, and I'll go like this. Once. Is this called a knot? Because it can't hold. So you get the idea. If I tie in a way where it can't hold, I just went once over. But when you tie your shoes, like you over here, if you could just go over this, like this, I go once. It's nothing because it can't hold. Okay, that clear? Okay, so if someone's going to tie their shoes the way I showed you before, the regular way, a knot with a bow, and he plans that these shoes will stay tied he never takes, that's how he ties it, it stays this way, he just pulls off his shoes, and people go like this, they pull off their shoe, and that's it. Let's say, if you tie your shoe in such a way, it's called a permanent knot, okay? That's a permanent knot. Okay, so anytime you tie something and your plan is to leave it this way, it's permanent. If when you tie it, maybe you will untie it, maybe you won't, you don't have any specific plan, but it's possible that you will. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. So then it's a non-permanent knot. Okay, so now that we understand what's a knot and what's called permanent, now we're going to discuss that halacha. Okay, so you wrote down a permanent knot, yeah? You have written down the word permanent knot or Kosheir shel kayama. Then you have non-permanent knot. So a permanent knot, of course, is asur, but that's asur min ha-Torah. It's asur by the Torah. A non-permanent knot is asur midrabanan. So they're both asur. What does it mean? So we know what a permanent knot means, but what's a non-permanent knot? What's if I tie it and I plan to leave it there for 3 days? So that's a non-permanent knot. What's if I tie it there and I plan to leave it there? I tie my shoes in the morning and I plan to untie it at night, like normal people do. Yeah, they untie their shoes at night. So that's a non-permanent knot. That's a non-permanent knot. It would seem like it's a non-permanent knot, right? That means you can't tie your shoes at Shabbos. Okay, that's what I want to get to. So again, we're saying a non-permanent knot is asur midrabanan. Let me just finish explaining. A non-permanent knot is asur midrabanan. It's rabbinically prohibited to tie a non-permanent knot. So my question to you is, if I'm tying, I can't tie my shoes in the morning. I plan to untie it at night. It's a non-permanent knot, so I'm not allowed to tie my shoes. You all know that you're allowed to tie your shoes. Now I'm going to tell you the reason why you're allowed to tie it. Why? Because if you plan to tie it in a way that you're going to untie it within 24 hours, nothing. Then there's no problem. Then it's not even in the category of a non-permanent knot. It's permitted. There's no issue. So it only becomes an issue with Rabbanan if you plan to leave it there for 24 hours. So the reason why you're allowed to tie your shoes Shabbos morning is because you untie it at night. But if, let's say, just hypothetically speaking, you tie your shoes one Shabbos morning and you plan to leave it untied for 24 hours because you're going on a flight, Motzei Shabbos, and you don't plan to untie it for whatever reason, you will not be allowed to tie your shoes Shabbos morning if you plan to leave it there for 24 hours. Okay, so you have a burning question.
Yeah. But what if like you tie it in the way where you can like pull it out, but but sometimes it falls out on its own, but you're not intending to actually take it out. But you know that it could fall out on its own. Sometimes it unties.
You're tying your shoes and sometimes it unties, so what? It's still a knot, that's a knot.
So I have to untie Motzei Shabbos.
Make sure I understand you. You're asking if you tie your shoes in a regular way, which we said this is called a knot,
The bow.
the knot in the bow, but sometimes it falls out on its own. It's still a knot. It's still called a knot. And if you plan to tie it to leave it there for 24 hours, then it's called a non-permanent knot, and you're not allowed to do that on Shabbos.
So I have to untie my shoes on Shabbos.
No, what we're saying is that, okay. So now everyone get this question? The question is, if I tie my shoes Shabbos morning, I must make sure to untie Motzei Shabbos? If I leave it there for 24 hours, I transgress? The answer is no. If when I tied it in a way with the intention that sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. In other words, as long as there's no clear intention that I'm leaving there for 24 hours. If you tie it and the way you do things, the way your custom is that sometimes you untie it at night, sometimes you don't.
I don't ever.
One second, I'm explaining you when you understand. If you tie your shoes Shabbos morning and you have no specific plan on Motzei Shabbos, you're leaving it tied, which means that there's a possibility that you will untie Motzei Shabbos, because many times you untie your shoes at the end of the day, usually. I'm explaining the scenario to everyone, not just to you. I'm explaining the thing. Means if the person many times unties it, meaning he might untie it. There's a possibility that he will untie it. That means at that time when he tied it, he didn't tie it with the intention that it's staying 24 hours. It's very important that you bring up a good point, and it's very important for everyone to understand the logic behind it. You have to understand, when you're tying your shoes Shabbos morning, and you're tying it in a way where, what's your plan? Sometimes I might untie, no, I go to sleep, I usually untie. Sometimes I don't, sometimes I do. That's fine, there is no problem. The only problem is when you tie it, if you tie it, and when you tie it, your intention is, I'm leaving it tied 24 hours, I plan not to untie it, then that's prohibited. But if it could go either way, it doesn't matter, which means even if you end up leaving your shoes tied 24 hours, it doesn't matter, because at the time when you tied it, you didn't intend it that way. It's possible that you will untie it, which means at that state, at that point when you tied it, it was tied in a way where it's very possible that it will not stay tied for 24 hours. So therefore, when you tied it, there was no problem. So the fact that your shoes are going to stay tied for 24 hours, that's not a problem. Does everyone get this? Yeah?
I get that.
You know what I'm saying?
I get what you're saying, but what I'm saying is, I never untie my shoes at night.
You never untie, and you tie them in the morning?
I only tie them whenever they fall out.
Okay, so your situation, you tie your shoes and you leave it tied all the time,
Yeah.
unless it unties.
Yeah.
So now you will not be allowed to tie your shoes Shabbos morning. Unless, but it was a very simple advice. You have in mind that you will untie Motzei Shabbos.
So I could, if I untie Motzei Shabbos.
You have to, doesn't matter what you actually do, you have to, well, it isn't sort of in this case, the point is you have to have in mind, you have to have intention when you tie your shoes Shabbos morning that I will untie Motzei Shabbos. That's your plan. You have to plan to untie Motzei Shabbos. You get what I'm saying?
Because I know that I usually don't.
Exactly, because otherwise that means it's a permanent knot. And it's going to be an Issa Minatayna, according to many opinions, because it's a permanent knot. You plan to leave it there forever. As again, forever does not mean forever. Forever means as far as you're concerned now, I have no plan to untie it. If you don't have any plans to untie something, it means as of now, you plan to leave it this way, that's a permanent knot. And then it's Issa Minatayna. Okay, is this clear? Yes.
Is it like legitimate to like have that intention if you know that like you're a forgetful person and you're probably not gonna like you're like, okay, my intention is to untie it later, and like you know it's not gonna end up happening.
Okay, let me try to understand your question. You're saying that if you have intention Shabbos morning when you tie your shoes in her situation,
Yeah, I also
that,
just
that,
keep
that
making
you
it.
have in mind that you will untie Motzei Shabbos and you're afraid you might forget to untie it? Is that what you're asking?
No, because I understand that you're saying that like it doesn't matter what you actually end up doing, it's about your intention. But like you know when you're making the intention that like
That you're gonna
realistically
forget.
you're not gonna end up doing it. and
Why
that you're
aren't you
forget-
going to do it? Because you're going to forget?
Yeah,
That's already okay. So we have to make it very clear that your intention is real. If your intention is real, then that's your plan is that you will untie it. But you're saying, but I might forget, Don't worry about that.
okay.
If the intention is real, intention is real. If you end up forgetting, if you make it, if you're like, okay, I'll untie it. I'll forget, but I have to have intent. The intention has to be real. That's the point. You're planning to untie it. If you forget, you forgot. So, but your intention was to untie it. It has to be a real intention. Yeah.
Last time I should don't have any intention. I'm just
Do you take off your shoes at night when you go to sleep? You untie them?
depends.
Sometimes yes, sometimes no, right?
I don't think about that
It
when I.
doesn't matter. Many times you untie it, so that's what it matters. What intention is only when you don't have a debt, you don't have a specific custom of how you do things. If your debt is your ways, you untie it, you do. So that's like you had intention. It's the same idea. So there's no
Even
problem.
when I'm like tying my shoes, I don't have any thoughts going in my mind.
No, you don't need the thoughts because that's what you do. It's only an issue if you're dead of his. If the way you do things, you tie your shoes is that you leave it 24 hours, like in her situation, then you have that problem. But otherwise, it's not a problem. Yeah.
So like I take out a garbage bag and I make a bow, not bow. And I'm gonna open it later to put in more garbage. Is that not right?
Okay, very good. So good. So I was going to discuss it later. We'll discuss it now. So let's talk about taking out the garbage. So first, let's start. First, everyone hear me? Can everyone hear me? So to start with tying the garbage, a lot of people make this mistake. They tie the garbage and they take it outside. I mean, whatever the permitted way, wherever they bring it to. And they don't realize when you tie the garbage, it's an issue because you're doing a permanent knot. You're tying it and you plan to leave it this way. Now, if you tie it once, if you take the garbage bag and you go once, and many times it could hold somewhat. Whatever, you don't do it this way, but I'm saying if someone does it like that and it holds a little bit, that's okay. In halacha, I'm not saying it's proper in terms of behavior that's put the garbage is going to open up. I'm discussing the halacha now. But the way people usually do the garbage, they go once and twice. That's a knot. You can't do that on Shabbos.
But what about?
But now, the question was asked, what about if you're closing the garbage and you plan to open it again? So anytime you make a knot and you plan to open it within 24 hours, there is no problem. There is an exception, we'll soon get to it. But generally speaking, that's why you can tie your shoes. Anytime you tie something and your intention is to untie it within 24 hours, it's okay. So for example, if you close up, you put the collar into the bag, Shabbos, Friday night, and when you do this, what do you do many times? Go like this, right? So you do switch.
What about the slip knot?
Pass it around. So is that a knot? Yes. So are you allowed to do that on Shabbos, Friday night?
No.
Can I do this Friday night?
Are you gonna open it on Shabbos?
Shabbos morning, I'll be opening it again to take the more Shabbos, so it's within 24 hours.
Yeah.
Sure.
So if I tie it with intention to open within 24 hours, there's no problem.
Even a knot like that, usually you can't open a knot like that.
Oh, very good. I'm gonna get to that. So I see, you know more, okay?
I don't know.
I'm gonna explain that. Now, I was gonna get to that. There's something called a Kosheir. You don't have to write down this word if you want. You could Kosheir Maaseh Uman. the work of a craftsman. In the times of the Gemara, they had special types of knots with camels and different things, how they made really strong professional knots, strong knots. We're not experts to know what they are. Now, anytime we make a strong knot, so now I'm going to show you the difference. Within this type of knot, this knot could be two different things. And you want to see it from far away. So I'm going to explain it to you. I just showed you this is a knot. Now, just watch what I'm doing. You just watch what I'm doing. What I'm doing. You see this knot? Yes. Now, look what I'm doing. You see what I'm doing? I tighten it. Is there a difference?
Yeah.
Now I made it tight. When you make it tight, now it becomes a problem even less than 24 hours. Midrabanan, there's machlokes. It's machlokes, but the halacha is if you make a very strong knot, that's what you're referring to. Then even less than 24 hours is going to be a problem. So when we talk about Friday night, you're going to close them. You could close the challah this way because you could use it Shabbos morning. We're not talking about when you make it very tight, but the next day you're gonna have to try to really work hard to open it up. If it's so strong that the next morning you're gonna have to work very hard. You see this? Now you have to work hard to open it. That's a very strong. That's a strong knot. That even less than 24 hours, you can't tie. So what you're seeing now is that the same exact knot could be a regular knot and a strong knot. Depends how tight it is. And when it's very tight, even less than 24 hours is going to be a problem. Yes.
So just to clarify, so say that someone double knocks their shoelaces just in general.
1 second. So you're able to open it. Okay. But it's hard to open. Huh?
Comment, I like this one.
Right. No, but in Spain, the point, you're not asking that, you're not trying to ask the question. The point is, doesn't mean it's impossible. I mean, it's very difficult, right?
It's more difficult.
If it's difficult to open, you really have to work hard to open it. You can't just, like when you open your shoes, right? No big deal. So you have to work hard to open it. That you cannot do even if it's less than 24 hours.
The trick is to twist it out.
Whatever it is, but it because it requires more work, you can't do that. Yeah.
So say that someone double knocks their shoelaces just regularly from day to day. On Shabbos, you wouldn't be able to do that even if you could open it up easily within.
Okay, that's a very good question. Let's say someone double knots their shoelaces every single day, right?
Yeah.
Now, what do you mean by double knot the
So
shoelaces?
you tie it once, right? Right? And
No,
then-
show exactly because it can mean, okay. Let me show you if everyone can see this. Can everyone see what I'm doing here? Okay. I want to, you tell me if you mean this. You go like this once, yeah?
Yeah.
And then you take this and you go like that?
Yeah,
Like that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
so they're both easily open.
Now, the question is, let's explain something else before this, and then we'll explain what you're asking. A regular double knot could be considered a strong knot, which means, let's say if on Shabbos someone goes once, which once is nothing, and then you go twice, and you pull it. Is this a knot?
Yeah.
Yes. If I go very strong, it'll be a strong knot. So now, what you're asking, when you're tying your shoes once, regular, and then you go over again. So that will be the same idea. If you do it very, very strong, it all depends how strong you do it. If you do it really strong, it could be considered a strong knot, which you're not allowed to do. But if you don't do it very strong, which means it's easy to untie, means you go like this once, then you go over like this, but you don't do it strong. You don't do it really strong, then it shouldn't be a problem.
Okay.
But if you do it really, so you have to be careful not to do it too strong. Okay? Any other questions?
Is it better to tie it once and have it keep falling out over and over and keep having to tie knots? Or is it better to like tie it a little bit tighter and not have to keep tying knots?
What do you mean by
all
tying
Shabbos?
once? Because once is a relative term. Once could
Like,
mean nothing. Once can mean. Look, let me understand. This is once, but it's holding. But if I go once around my shoes, if I'm going to do this to my shoes when I want to tie my shoelaces, and I'm going to go like this once over my shoe, it's nothing. It's going to fall out.
like if I
So,
tie
so
my
again, so
shoe,
once doesn't say anything.
like if I do a bow on my shoe
Yeah.
and like 5 minutes later it falls out. So is it better to every 5 minutes have to tie a bow on Shabbos, or is it better to tie it a little tighter and have to only tie it once?
I'm not really sure what you're saying. So
How
let me
about a
show
little
it.
stubble?
Let me see if I understand what you're saying. You're tying your shoes the regular way like this. Yeah,
Yeah.
like this.
You
You're tying
leave
it
like this.
like this.
And then
Now-
5 minutes later, it comes out and you have to do it
No, so
again.
pull it, make it a little tighter. This you can make tight. Let's make this clear. When you're tying your shoes the regular way and not in a bow, you could pull it tight and so it can hold. It's not called a strong knot. Why not?
Because you can pull it.
Very good. So it's no problem when you're putting a knot in a bow to make it tight within just the knot in the bow itself, because as long as you can give a pull and it falls out, then it's not considered a strong knot.
Yeah.
Again, less than 24 hours, as we discussed before.
Wait, can I see your string? I don't think that's how I tie my shoes.
Okay,
If you do it like that.
look, you're going like this. Look, a bow.
I don't think bunny ears are a slip knot.
Now, I'm doing it tight. I pull very tight. I pull very tight. It's not gonna fall out. I mean, anything can happen during the day, but I'm saying this is pretty tight. But because after it goes like this, it doesn't, here it felt like it was harder to go out. I'm not sure why, because I was holding on to it. Again,
I think it's because it wasn't around something.
right.
But somehow I
Right. But when
tie
it's
my
around your
shoes.
shoes, and if you make it very tight, if you take the string and pull it, it's gonna come right out, so there's no problem.
Okay.
Yeah,
The thing is, may I see the string? There's a different way of tying shoes. I'm not entirely sure it's a slip knot. I can do it. Do it like around your phone or something.
Okay. Like I tie my shoes like this. I don't know if it's a slip knot.
that's the regular way of tying, not make it.
No.
That's what he's
No,
doing.
it's
Because
two bunny
you can
ears
pull it.
instead of
okay.
one bunny ear and around.
Also, because you can pull it.
What?
But then that's
Instead
more
of
Shabbos
one
friendly
bunny
that
ear and
way.
around
Why?
the bow,
Because
it's two
because
bunny
it's not gonna be
ears,
permanent.
and they
Because then you
tie
can
two
always
bunny-
pull it and it's not a
Same
knot.
thing.
Oh, okay.
Because if it was the normal way, you can't pull it, there'd still be a knot underneath.
It's just how you do it, this is the technical thing, how you, so when both bows, you go around, but.
It comes to the same.
So you
Yeah,
can
it's the
make
same
that
idea.
as tight as you can, as you want, and it's fine.
If it's a knot on a bow, you can make it very tight, because that's, again, when we say a strong knot, you can't do for, even for less than 24 hours. When we say you cannot do a strong knot, even for less than 24 hours, what do you mean by, again, what does mean a strong knot? Strong knot means that it requires, you have to really get into it and work to get it out. But if you can get it out with one thing, it's not a strong knot. It's a knot. It's a knot. But are you doing it for less than 24 hours? Okay. Yeah,
What about the butterfly one?
I'm not familiar with that, so you have to show me.
Yeah, we just did that one.
You want to show? It could be not even a problem to start with. Shall I show you? Okay. Now. So what are you doing?
It's the same knot.
And then afterwards. Something like that.
Okay, how do you take it apart?
This is
Yeah,
really bad, but
let me see taking it apart. It's a knot. It's not a strong, it's a knot.
it is stronger than regular bow.
It's like
double
before you
Took it apart very
before you
easy.
can pull it out.
It wasn't tight when it was on the phone, maybe? It didn't seem so tight. It seemed like you pulled it apart very quickly. That's what it seemed like. No, you know, the shoe is different.
So that's what it depends on?
Yeah, it comes out, yeah. Now, there's the melacha of Kosheir, tying, then there's the melacha of matir, untying. The parallel melacha, tying and untying. So whatever rules we gave for tying will apply to untying. If it's a knot that you're not allowed to make, you're not allowed to untie. If it's a knot you're allowed to make, you could untie. So you have to remember, whatever we said for tying, if it's a knot that's prohibited to be done on Shabbos, then that knot you cannot untie on Shabbos.
Unless you tied it beforehand, no? Unless
Before
you tied it
Shabbos?
before Shabbos.
If you what is it? If you tied it with intention that it should stay for 24 hours, let's say you tie
Not
your
like a
shoes.
shoe, like you're not gonna.
Let's say you should stay 24 hours, right? We said you can't make such a knot.
Well, what if you?
And now comes Shabbos, and now you want to untie it, then you cannot untie that knot because the knot is a prohibited knot. Yeah.
If you have like a challah bag that has like that, like this, can you just like slice the knot if you want? Like if it was tied
Okay,
before Shabbos, and you
could
wanted
you cut the knot? No, cutting the knot.
sometime, but can you cut under the knot to get to the challah?
So cutting the knot itself is not proper. No. 1 second. Yeah, you cannot. Whenever you cannot, if you're not allowed to take apart this knot, you cannot cut the knot also. It's the same idea. You could, there's no problem tearing the plastic, there's no problem, tear it open, no problem on Shabbos. You're not making a keli, there's no letters. You can do it, you just won't have the bag the next time, but there's no problem tearing it open. Yeah,
What if you cut? Is cutting underneath the knot?
underneath the knot, there's no problem cutting, you can't cut on the knot itself.
But like underneath, like it's the same idea as tearing open the back.
Cutting under the knot, above, below,
Like you're basically cutting it so you can get it.
yeah,
Okay.
as long as you're not touching the knot. The knot is the problem. It's not, we're not saying, oh, you can't get into this. This is like, you know,
Pentagon level
it's
security.
forbidden territory. It was saying the knot is the problem. Yeah, yeah.
What about a jewelry chain that got knotted up and you want to wear it on Shabbos?
It got knotted up by accident.
Right.
Okay, so here's a very interesting halacha. We'll talk about a pair of shoes. What happens if you want to put on your shoes and you start tying it, all of a sudden, you know what happens? You pull it the wrong way and you made a knot. You made a strong knot. Now you have to work hard to take it apart. Now what happens now? Now you can't take apart, it's a strong knot. We said a strong knot, you cannot tie, you cannot untie. So what do? Anyone knows? So the answer is you could untie it. Why? It wasn't your intention to make the knot. So what am I talking about now? I'm discussing now when you're tying your shoes and by mistake, you pulled something the wrong way and now you have like a strong knot. You didn't make it this way. That's not what your intention was. You pulled something the wrong direction and you ended up with a strong knot. That wasn't your intention. So such a knot you're allowed to untie because it wasn't made with intention. So it's not considered in the category of a knot. If you did it intentionally, of course you can't. Ms. Dowd, everyone get this? Okay. Shabbos, everyone. And
Shabbos.
we should have a good summer, healthy summer.
Man.
Thank you. I don't understand.
Oh, your question about the paper towels.
No, somebody's gonna.
Yeah, tear on the perforations. Even none of the perforations you cannot tear because you're making it into a vessel.